Hello, and thank you for joining us today for part one of our Neighbors Together Leadership Development Training Series, Tenants Rights, presented by Community Action Program. Next slide. So for the agenda today of our training, we will start with introductions for us, who is Neighbors Together Community Action Program members, and the purpose of this training, understanding tenants' rights and the legal protections, legislations, summary, and next steps. Next slide. So introductions. So Neighbors Together Community Action Program team consists of myself, Nailah Abdul-Mubdi, I'm the community organizer, and Devontae Tate, who is also the community organizer. And Amy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Amy Blumsack. I'm the Director of Organizing and Policy.
Thank you so much, Amy. And also, if you would like to ask any questions or, need additional information, please do not hesitate to email us for any questions or comments or any further assistance post-training by email us at communityaction@neighborstogether.org. Next slide. So the purpose, here we are with the purpose of today's training, is to equip community members with the knowledge, confidence, and resources to resist illegal landlord tactics and leverage tenant protection to stay housed. Next slide. So here we are with understanding tenants' rights and legal protections. So as a tenant, you have the right to a safe and livable housing. So what that means is every tenant is legally entitled to a safe, clean, and well-maintained home. The law is known as warranty of habitability. It's a law a landlord cannot break, even if it's written into a lease. Under this law, landlord must provide essential services such as steady heat during the winter months, hot water all year round, clean water, and electricity. So although in some buildings, the tenants is responsible to pay for the electricity. However, the landlord has the infrastructure to make sure that the building have electricity running. So the landlord does have the authority with the power to cut off electricity so that you don't have access to it, although you're paying for it. And lastly, provide legally required structural repairs, which consists of repairing any broken floors, walls, doors, windows, any mold remediation, lead paint abatement, and pest infestations. Next slide. Okay, so now that we shared what the landlord is obligated to provide for a tenant, now, if the landlord does not provide these essential services and does any repair for you as a tenant, this is how you exercise your tenant rights. And that's by one, you could just file a complaint just simply by calling 311. And post or after calling 311, you can visit HPD building information online by going to hpdonline.gov. And with that information, you can check and see if the building is rent stabilized. You can also see history of tenant harassment. And you can review building or apartment violations and if they've been remediated. And also you can follow up after you file a complaint on 311. There is a complaint number where you can also check and see if your complaint has been submitted, and it will be shown on the dashboard, but we'll get into that. Okay, so third, it's by visiting justfixit.org. And on that website, it's a tool to assert your tenant rights. And on that website, you can request repairs. You can learn if you're covered by good cause eviction and request apartment rent history and more. Next. Okay, so as I shared about HPD online, and there's a dashboard. So what you would do is on the top left of the image, it's HPD, excuse me, online. And you could just go to, find building information. So following the red arrow and the contact tab is highlighted address, you could just enter in the address there. Followed by entering the address. Here, I just made up a address here, and it come out to be an official apartment with a dashboard of a lot of complaints. So on this dashboard, you can see that there are 34 complaints that tenant had filed, and 11 violations upon, the HPD inspectors, doing the inspection and what they found. And also the building had to pay fees, filing fees or permits, whatever the case may be. And then also you see the litigation. Litigation is one, meaning that the landlord took the tenant to court, or the tenant took the tenant took the landlord to court. But we would discuss more about that as well. And here you could, and then if you go on, okay, the content tab where it says overview, there's more content tab where you can find more information regarding to the building, regarding any complaints, like further details, any violations. So violations, we would discuss that as well, which would be any violations for us, the building repairs and things of that nature, and any bud bed bug information, and more. So you can find all that there. And then to the right, here's where you will go online and assert your tenant rights. So you go to justvisit.org, and to the top right, if you see the red arrow, this is where you go to click on tools, and followed by clicking on that link where it says tool, you'll be led to this dashboard here that gives you everything to actually exercise your tenant rights. So you can also, there's a template where you could request repairs to your apartment. So it's a letter of complaint just to basically let your landlord know, like, listen, I have some complaints that need to be fixed, and here's a template to, you could just write it out. And then followed by the next red arrow, you can learn if you are covered under good cause eviction protections. But we will go into more about what good cause eviction is. And then follow the next red arrow is where you could order your apartment's rent history. And we will discuss more about why that's necessary and the laws that's protect you from that for, illegal rent increases. So you need those documents just to start off, to exercise your rights as a tenant. And yeah, next slide. Okay, and continue. Certificate of no harassment. So we already show you what the HPD online give you, and also on the dashboard you will see also certificate of no harassment, also known as CONH, which is an official document issued by the New York City Housing Preservation and Development, also known as HPD, that confirms that the property owner or prior owner did not engage in tenant harassment. And tenant harassment includes pressuring tenants to vacate, such as threats, intimidation, illegal evictions, or cutting off essential services, such as heat, hot water, and also electricity. Under this document, property owners are required to obtain a certificate of no harassment before applying to New York City's Department of Buildings for a permit to make any major renovations or alterations, conduct a full or partial demolition to the building or apartment. And the CONH, I'm going to refer that to Certificate of No Harassment, is required when changing an apartment use for SROs, which is single room occupancy dwellings, buildings in any special zoning districts, in certain buildings with 6 or more units. And that meets the CONH criteria due to distress, for vacate orders, or any prior harassment. And the The COHN exists so that it actually prevent landlords from displacing tenants and ensure ethical treatment of residents. Next slide. Okay. And here we have legislation. Amy, take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nailah. So it's really important to understand where you live, what laws cover where you live, right? There are different kinds of tenant protection laws depending on the kind of apartment that you live in. So knowing your rights really starts by understanding which kind of apartment you live in and which laws cover your home. New York City and New York State laws set limits on what landlords can and cannot do based on those various laws. And so we wanted to share the three main sets of protections that could be covering your home and can help provide you with tenants' rights. Hold on. Go away, little thing. How do I get to my next slide? There we go. Okay. So the first law is called the Good Cause Eviction Law. This law created basic tenant protections for New Yorkers living in unregulated apartments. So most people have heard of rent stabilization. We're going to get to that next. But an unregulated tenant is anyone who lives in an apartment that is not under rent stabilization, right? So good cause eviction law was created to protect tenants against things like retaliatory evictions, unfair rent hikes, refusal to renew the lease. And essentially, this law requires the landlord to have good cause for evicting someone, right? It also does something important, which is to protect tenants against unreasonable rent increases. So there's a formula that the law uses to calculate what is considered reasonable or unreasonable. And if your landlord sets an unreasonable rent increase that goes beyond what the formula allows, and you have a difficulty paying your rent, you can use that as a defense in housing court, and will have protections under good cause eviction. Now, as Nailah mentioned, on justfix.org, it is important to look up whether your unit is covered by good cause. Not all unregulated units are. So make sure you look up the tool and answer the questions on using that tool to figure out if your apartment is covered or not. The next kind of tenant protections that exist in New York City are rent stabilization laws. So the rent stabilization laws, I think, is the thing that most people are the most familiar with. And this regulates rents and protects the right to lease renewal in rent stabilized units, which most rent stabilized buildings were built before 1974 and have 6 or more units. And so if you are a rent stabilized tenant, it means you're guaranteed a lease renewal and your rent is capped at a certain amount each year based on the decision by the New York City Rent Guidelines Board. Each year they vote to make a decision on how much rent is allowed to go up by. And your landlord is not allowed by law to charge you any more than that for rent. And so that is also why Nailah was talking about needing to look up your rent history. So when we say rent history, if you're a rent stabilized tenant, it's really important to request your rent history, because while many landlords do charge the lawful amount of rent, there are landlords out there who are deceptive or who have illegally, taken their units out of rent stabilization and are charging tenants more than what is legally allowed by the rent stabilization laws. And if that is the case with you, you could both receive a rent reduction to the lawful limit and receive back payment for all of the over rent that you paid. So it's really important. Also, you have all these very important and strong tenants' rights as a rent stabilized tenant. So you want to know if you're covered by those rights. And then the third piece of legislation that's really important to understand is the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019. So you might hear this referred to as the HSTPA. And this was a law passed in 2019 at New York State level. and it really strengthened tenants' protections across the state. It did a couple of things that are really important. It capped security deposit at 1 month's rent. It bans tenant blacklists. And it also specified how much time landlords were required to give to tenants if they were going to either give them a rent hike or renew or not renew their lease. Let's see. A tenant blacklist. We should probably explain what that is. A tenant blacklist is like there are services that landlords use to find out whether prospective tenants have been to housing court. The thing that is problematic about these blacklists, as they're so called, is that often landlords use them to say we don't want anyone who's been to housing court, but the lists don't specify whether the person has brought a case against their landlord for failure to make repairs, for example, or whether it was a landlord bringing a case against the tenant for, back, like say, owing back rent. So the HSTPA bans the use of those lists. And that creates, I think, a more equitable system for people who are trying to access housing. The next thing the HSTPA did was capped application and background fees at $20. It also requires your landlord to return your security deposit to you within 14 days of you moving out of your apartment. And then it also caps rent increases due to things called major capital improvements, which are repairs made to the entire building, or individual apartment improvements, which are improvements made to just the specific unit or a specific unit. So like a new stove would fall under an individual apartment improvement, but a new boiler would fall under a major capital improvement. And these were ways that landlords used to raise the rent for everyone. And so the HSTPA laws have sort of put a limit on how much your rent can be increased due to those, and also required stronger documentation from the landlord to prove those costs. Did I miss anything, Nailah? Anything you want to add?
No, you got it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So, in summary, we're going to review what we just went over. As tenants in New York City, you have tenants' rights. Your landlord is obligated to give you a safe, clean environment and provide essential services like heat and hot water, and also to provide structural repairs. If you find that you are having trouble in your building or your apartment and you want to know how to exercise some of your tenant rights, here are some really important ways that you can do it. If you want to make a complaint about conditions in your building or your apartment, you should call 311 and file a complaint. You can say, I want to file a complaint. My landlord shut off the heat and hot water. It's December, by law, I'm supposed to have those things. I want to file a complaint. Or you can say, there's mold in my apartment and I've asked the landlord to fix it and they won't fix it. And HPD will put a complaint, and then you'll be able to see it in the HPD online system, which we're referencing here, the second bullet point, and which we showed you earlier. So that online building information through the HPD website is a great resource for folks to be able to get on and learn more about both your apartment and also your building, as well as your landlord, right? Because as Nailah reviewed, you can find out, how many complaints or violations does this building have? What kinds of violations or complaints have been made about this building? And you can even see it specified out by apartment unit. Is there a history of litigation or, lawsuits in this court cases in this building or with this landlord? Is there a history of bed bugs? Was it historically rent stabilized? If it was, you should definitely request your rent history just to make sure that you know whether your rent stabilized or not. And there's, a variety of other really important information that you can find there. The other important tool that you can use is called justfix.org. You can use it to, as Nailah showed us, request repairs. There's like a template letter that you can use to in writing request repairs from your landlord, which is, it's good to put it in writing so that you can create a paper trail for yourself. You can request your rent history, and you can check to see if you're covered under good cause eviction. And you can also look by searching the building address or your apartment address. You can look down into a more detailed level for information about that building. So, who is the landlord? Similar, you can see that the information from the HPD online buildings information portal, also through JustFix. So there's lots of really rich information there for you to explore as a tenant, which is going to help you to learn more about where you're living and who your landlord is. And then the certificate of no harassment, right? Remember that your landlord has to get a certificate of no harassment, which means essentially that they have been found to not engage in tenant harassment. And they have to have that in order to make major structural changes to their building. And the goal of this certificate of no harassment program was to create financial disincentives for landlords to harass their tenants and push their tenants out as a means of making more money. Historically, we see tenants who are paying lower rent sort of being harassed and purposely pushed out of their buildings so that the landlord can then charge a higher amount of rent to a new tenant. So that's more or less what the certificate of no harassment program was created to do. So be sure to look into that. And then last but not least, as a tenant, it's super important to understand what laws cover the apartment that you're living in. So if you're a rent stabilized tenant, it's important to know that. It's important to request your rent history so you can know that you're being charged the right amount of rent. And you can understand that you're legally entitled to a lease renewal and that your rent can't go up more than a certain amount each year. If you're an unregulated tenant, it's important to look up and find out if you're covered by the good cause eviction law, because that's going to provide you with also some basic tenants' rights, the right to lease renewal, caps how much rent can go up each year. So important to know that. And then also the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019 creates a lot of other important tenants' rights for folks. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. Nailah, did I leave anything out? Anything you want to say before I go to the next slide?
You got it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, I hope that was helpful. I'm going to pass it back to Nailah for next steps.
Yes, thank you, Amy. So in next steps, we have Wednesday, July 29th from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. We have our next social housing town hall meeting, which will be on Zoom. And Thursday, August 20th at 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. is our next value and housing meeting on Zoom. And Wednesday, August 26th, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. is our next social housing town hall meeting on Zoom. And Neighbor Together will be closed on Monday, August 31st through Monday, September 8th. And we will reopen on Tuesday, September 9th. Should I explain social housing? I
Yeah,
forgot.
yeah.
I'll just
Let's talk
lead
about
into.
let's talk about what social housing is, and let's explain what the value in housing
Okay.
campaign is.
Okay, sorry. I was just in the mode of regular meeting. But yes, social housing is will be a state housing development authority all over New York State. And what social housing is, it would be democratic controlled housing authority, which consists of tenants or New Yorkers living homes, living apartment, mostly a um cooperative home. Hold on. Go ahead, Amy.
It's okay. Don't worry. I mean, I think all of what Nailah said is correct. And I think
Mhm.
probably the most important thing to understand about social housing at the high level is that it is housing that is being pulled out of the private market, right? So if you have lived in New York City for really any time at all, or if you're, paying attention to what's happening or just looking around the city, you know that real estate is super expensive. It's extremely hard to afford housing here. And that the reason for that is housing is used to make money on the private market, right?
Mhm.
It is a profit making mechanism for landlords and major corporate landlords. And so the idea of social housing is that it decommodifies it, right? It means it takes it off of the private market and sets it aside in a way that it will always be permanently affordable, democratically controlled, as Nailah said. So, meaning the people who live in it have a say in how it is run. Um, Ideally, it will be like use green energy and be climate resilient and be built with union labor. So, really, what we're talking about when we say social housing is these are meetings. Our social housing town halls are meetings where we work together and talk together and learn together about how do we create a New York City where there is affordable, permanently affordable housing that is controlled by the tenants and not sort of at the whim of private market forces. Hopefully that was clear. But if you're interested in learning more, email us at communityaction@neighborstogether.org or come join us for the next social housing town hall meetings. We'll put the links to those in the comments below the video. Um, Nailah, did you want to talk about value in housing real quick?
Yeah, sure. So our value housing monthly meeting is held third Thursday every month, where we discuss our campaigns on city and state local government. And we discuss campaign goals, we plan, we organize, and also we, share our input on how we want to see legislation implemented and basically discuss and do decision making on any goals for as legislation that we've been working on and prep our members to, speak at testimonies and rallies and things of that nature. So it consists of all of those things depending on the month and what's going on in our campaigns. So yes, please join us for our value housing meeting and we look forward to hearing from you, seeing you there, provide input and also be part of civic engagement with us at Neighbors Together. And you can also inquire by emailing us at communityaction@neighborstogether.org.
Great.
Yeah.
The value in housing meetings are particularly great. I mean, everyone is welcome, but they're
Yeah.
particularly great if you're a voucher holder. Value stands for Voucher Advocates Lifting Up Equity in Housing. So it's a campaign that was created for and by people with rental assistance vouchers in New York City. And, we're fighting to make them tools that work, tools that get people into safe, dignified, affordable housing and keep them there. And so, yeah, we would love to have you come join us. And yes, if you happen to be watching this video after all of these meetings are over, please just email us at communityaction@neighborstogether.org to find out our upcoming meetings, or just check the calendar on our website, neighborstogether.org, www.neighborstogether.org, and you'll be able to see all upcoming meetings. And thank you.
Thank you.
Big thank you for being here. Anything you want to say, Nailah, before I talk about part two?
No, I can't think of a thing right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this part one of our leadership development training. We do have a part two, so stick around. The second video, part two, will be on housing court and the eviction process. And we'll be discussing what is housing court and what is the difference between a legal eviction done through housing court and an illegal eviction. And those are two really important distinctions to be able to make, which is which, and to understand how the housing court process works so that you can exercise your rights and remain in your home as long as possible. Okay, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Take care.